Here we go. Let's look at David in Psalm 18. With you I can charge into battle. With my God I can leap over a wall. He's the God who trains my hands for war so that my arms can bend a bronze bow. That's King David speaking in Psalm 18. Here he is in Psalm 144. He prepares me for war. He trains me for battle. If you are going to walk with Jesus, you are going to know battle. You are going to know war. Part of the covenant of God is that we are warriors. We are fighters. We are battlers. Abraham was a great man. He was a servant of God, but he was also a trained warrior. He had 318 servants in his home that were born in his house. They were trained in war. When the people of God came out of Egypt, there were shepherds, there were farmers, there were fathers and sons, there were priests, there were all kinds of people, but they were also trained in battle. And when they went through the wilderness and went through the land, they were to take the land by the edge of the sword. They were to rise up and take the Amalekites. And so all of these examples reflect to us the fact that battling is a part of our kingdom walk with God. And so because of that, He's given us nice weapons of warfare that we use. And so we come against principalities and powers, and we wrestle against those, and we contend with things. We contest things. We cast down things. We work this. We work that. We throw down accusations and lies and condemnations and all these kinds of things. That is part of walking with Jesus. You throw junk down that doesn't belong to you. So there is a part of the Christian experience that is a battling experience. Now, one of the great things about that is that because He requires me to go to war, because He requires me to battle things in my own life, He also gives me the victory for that. He is not going to ask me to contend and contest something that He does not give me the victory for. And so, I have the ability to overcome. And so when God's people are walking through, getting ready to go into the land, which is one of the crucial, critical moments for them when they are getting ready to go into land, these are some of the things that God says to them. Deuteronomy 2:31, I'm giving King Sihon and his country to you. Now go take his land. Well, if you knew King Sihon, that name means tumultuous. It means tempestuous. It means a lot of strength and storminess. And God says, listen, I don't care how big the storm is. I will give you the storm. I am bigger than the storm, right? And so He says, when you come up against this king, you take him down, because I am, notice it. And by the way, when God says I am, that's the end of it. Once He says I am, it's done. Whatever on the other side of it's fine, because He's the I am. I am giving King Sihon and his country to you. Now go take his land. So God's automatically telling him, you can do this, right? Well, it's not too long after that. Even Deuteronomy 3 says the same thing. Moses, don't be afraid of King Og. Is there anybody in the room that's afraid of King Og? Why would Moses have been afraid of King Og? Because King Og was about 13 and a half feet tall. His bed was 14 feet long. Wouldn't even fit in our master bedrooms. The guy was one of the last of the giants. And God says to Moses, do not be afraid of this guy. He says, listen to me. I don't care how big your problem is. I don't care how big it is. God says, I'll give it to you. I will allow you to overcome that. I will give you the victory over that. I am going to help you defeat him. I don't care how big he is, how tall he is, God says, and his army, and take over his land, destroy him and his people, just as you did, the Amorite King Sihon. So God says, look, you find Sihon, destroy it, contest, contend, fight, struggle, wrestle, victory, win. Og, wrestle, victory, win. But here's the thing. Not everything in the kingdom of God is a battle. God does not intend that you and I wrestle against everything. There are some things that we are not to wrestle against. There are some things that we are not to fight. There are some things that we are not to struggle against. In fact, when God's people are going into the land, God purposely would say, take that out, leave that alone. Come on now. When you shake your head, that means I move. Right? I keep going. All right, look at this. Deuteronomy 2. Do not bother them. God's telling his people now, come on, we're going into the land. You see that over there? Do not bother them. For I will not give you even 1 square foot of their land. So we bypassed the territory and we avoided the road. Listen, there are things that we encounter in life that God has no intention of you and I struggling against. We are not to fight them. We are not to contest them. We're not to contend them. Why? Because God wants to give us the wisdom to be able to know what is the enemy and what is not the enemy. You and I have to know that. We have to know the difference between what is something that we are to contend with and challenge and take out, and something that we are to leave alone because God is saying to us, don't even go there. Right? Now, what's the wisdom in this? Why would God say something like this to us and to them? Because when you struggle against something that God has not called you to struggle against, when you contend and wrestle and fight against something that God has not called me to fight, it is an absolute waste. It is a total waste. And let me break it down for you and let you know how big of a waste it is. Number one, it is a total waste of time. When I strive against something that is not in the purposes of God, I am actually striving against the purposes of God. I am actually working against God, and there's no gain in that. There's no good in that. Listen to what Gamaliel said. You're going to love Gamaliel. Gamaliel was sovereignly chosen by God to be the mentor of the person who would become Paul the Apostle. Gamaliel was his mentor. And God chose him sovereignly and put Saul at his knee and at his feet and trained him so that he would be ready to receive the kingdom of God. Something about Gamaliel is amazing. I want you to see if you can see it here. Here is Gamaliel, because they said, how many times do we have to beat these apostles before they'll stop doing what they're doing? We keep beating them and they keep coming back. Here's what he says. Here's my recommendation in this case. By the way, he's in the Sanhedrin. He's speaking to the other Sanhedrinites, or members of the Sanhedrin, who are all smarter than God. Here's what he says. Here's my recommendation in the case, gentlemen. Distance yourself from these men. Let them go. Don't even go there. If their plan or activity is of human origin, it will end in ruin. If it originates with God, you won't be able to stop them. Instead, you would actually find yourselves fighting God. So when I am struggling against something that God has not called me to struggle with, I am actually fighting the purposes of God. And that is a total waste of time. Secondly, it's a waste of space. Not them, it. When you wrestle, and I wrestle against something that God has not called us to wrestle against, it takes up so much of what's on the inside of you that you are no longer occupied with vision, occupied with faith, occupied with mission, occupied with... You are now preoccupied with what you're wrestling against that God's never called you to wrestle. So therefore, it's now eating up all the RAM inside of me. I asked this guy one time, what is wrong with my laptop? Remember when laptops used to be about that thick? That's with the cover open. Remember, they were thick. I said to this guy, what is wrong with my laptop? He goes, oh, you're out of RAM. And that's back when that was all techno speak. I said, RAM? What's that? He goes, well, you got so many programs running on your laptop, it's sucking all your memory. And you can't even do 2 + 2 on your computer because it's sucking up all your memory. You see, when I am distracted and I am contending with something and wrestling and struggling with something that God has not called me to struggle against, it's eating up all my spiritual RAM. Yeah. And thirdly, it is a total waste of energy. You know, when you battle against something, and I battle against something that God has not called me to struggle with, when God has said to me, and I didn't hear him, and he said to me, don't even go there. And I pick it up, and I struggle with it, and I contend, and I get in the midst of the fray when God has never called me to be there, It is a total waste of energy. I am spending my strength, my spiritual strength, for nothing. So, wisdom says, I need to know the difference. I need to know the difference between what I need to wrestle against and what I don't need to wrestle against. And so, today, very quickly, in the twinkling of an eye, with the sound of a trumpet, I want to give you very quickly, boom, boom, 2 things that God told Israel, don't even go there. On their way in now, into the land, here's the first one. The first one, I'm going to call them the Edomites. The Edomites. Here they are. Deuteronomy 2. Inform the people that they will be passing through the country belonging to their brothers, the Edomites. So God marches his people right past something and says, don't mess with it. He exposes them to things and says, don't even go there. Watch this. The descendants of Esau who live in Seir, the Edomites will be nervous. Oh, yeah. So be careful, God says, be careful. Look at this. Don't start a fight. For I have given them all the Mount Seir hill country as their, watch this now, permanent possession. And I will not give you even a tiny piece of their land. You don't have any inheritance, any business in that. You keep walking. Don't get in it. It's not your battle. It's not your struggle. Don't pick a fight. Keep on going. Why? Because the Edomites were of the descendants of Esau. And Esau and Jacob and the children of Israel, which are the children of Jacob, they have common blood. They have the same father, Isaac, the same father, all right? But they also have bad blood. Because you know, how many of you know you get some common blood going, you get some bad blood going too, right? Oh, yeah, I see a lot of amens on that one. Yeah, that's called life. And the bad blood was this. Come on now, let's be honest. Let's be honest. Esau got rooked. He got used. He got done dirty. He did. Come on. Yeah. It doesn't make any difference whether God says that Jacob, I loved Esau, I hated. He got done dirty. Now, here's what happened. By the way, that's also called life. All right. So here's what he did in response to that. Here it is, Genesis 27. Esau what? Held a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing his father had given him. Oh, and Esau determined in his heart. Now, when it's in your heart, watch out. The days of mourning for my father are approaching. Then I will kill my brother Jacob. Ooh, I'm going to kill him. It's determined in my heart, I'm going to kill him. So what is Esau doing? Esau is returning evil for evil. And God tells his people, you have no inheritance in that at all. I am not giving you any of Seir. Seir means a rough place. Esau means the rough one, the rough man, the red guy, the rough stuff. He had a rough life. They ended up with a rough inheritance, all because your choices lead to your inheritance. He chose to give evil, to return evil for evil. And when he did, God stuck him and all of his descendants in a place called Mount Seir that became their permanent possession. God says, you're not leaving here. Nobody else is coming in here. My people will never have that as their inheritance. I will not allow you to return evil for evil. You know what Samson said? They said, why'd you burn those fields? Because of what they did to me. Wow. God said, when somebody does something to you, don't even go there. Don't pick that up. Don't let that get in you. Don't strive with that. Don't contend. Don't chew on it when you get home. Don't wrestle over it. Don't wonder what in the world's going on. Why is this? Leave it. Don't even go there. Because it doesn't belong to you or to me. God said, you want to protect your inheritance? You want to get into the land? Don't return evil for evil. Can you believe this? Your brother Esau is comforting himself by planning to kill you. That's the next verse. You know what that means? That means he felt better. This made him feel better. Returning for evil will temporarily make you feel better, but it will destroy your inheritance. It will ruin your destiny. And you will end up with the Edomites in Mount Seir, who are outside the promises of God. Now, may I just say to you in the book of Hebrews, this thing is brought up again. Can you imagine? All the way from Genesis, they're still talking about it in Hebrews. Listen to what the message says in Hebrews 12. Work at getting along with each other. Notice what it says. It doesn't say get along with each other. It says work at it. Because I want to tell you something. It's work. You spend much time with me, you want to get along with me, you're going to have to work. Seriously, where's my wife? She's gone. She's left me. Listen, you get close to people, you got to work at it. Huh? And getting along with each other, and look at this, and with God. Because if you can't get along with each other, you're not getting along with God. Period. Otherwise, you will never get so much as a glimpse of God. In other words, you're going to miss your inheritance, he's saying. Make sure no one gets left out of God's generosity. That is the word grace in most of the translations, and it means this. Listen, when you're going along and you got some Edomites over here, which are your brothers, and they're distant relatives, and there's bad blood there, listen to what he says. Do not fail to appropriate grace in that situation, nor to apply grace in that situation. It's one thing to appropriate it for yourself. It's another to apply it to them. Make sure no one gets left out of God's generosity. Now watch this. Here we go. Watch this. Keep a sharp eye out for weeds of bitter discontent. A thistle or two gone to seed can ruin a whole garden in no time. Now watch out. Here it comes. Here it comes. Watch out for the Esau syndrome. Trading away God's lifelong gift in order to satisfy a short-term appetite. I'm gonna return evil for evil. And what am I going to do? I'm going to trade God's lifelong gift to satisfy a short-term appetite. Man that I've known since that I can remember, said to me one day, after I was already married, he was a patient of my dad's. He said, I had something wrong. I had a carotid artery that was blocked, and your dad missed it. And as a result of that, he said, I have a stroke. He had a stroke. And half of his body was paralyzed. And he told me, flat out he told me, he said, that was your dad's fault. He missed it. Now I want to tell you, my dad's a good doctor, but he's not Jesus. I don't know whether he missed it or not. I don't know whether that man was right or wrong, but I do know this. That man decided that he would hold that against my dad. You know what happened to him? He died. But it wasn't the stroke that got him. It was all the stuff that was eating up all his RAM on the inside. He wasted away. Why? Because he decided to return evil for evil. Absolutely ate him alive. Listen to what Peter says. Don't repay evil for evil or slander for slander, but rather say a blessing. Oh, that's good. Hey, there you go. You're talking about working at something. Hey, let's say a blessing. Okay, help me. This is what you were called to so that you may what? Inherit a blessing, because whatever is coming out of your mouth is what you're going to inherit. Wow. So what did David do? Look at this. Whoops. One too many. Look at this. David put groups of soldiers in Edom And all the Edomites became his servants. Oh, yeah, there you go. You see that now? Hey, no, we're not killing. No, you know what? That's going to serve me. I'm not going to serve it. You see that? All the Edomites became what? His servants. He didn't say, hey, I'm not serving that. And look at this. And the Lord gave David victory everywhere he went. Because if you can get victory over the Edomite problem, he will give you victory everywhere you go. Wow. One more real quick. Moabites. Oh, don't go there. When you see Moabites, don't even go there. Look what he says. Don't bother the Moabites. Okay. Don't start a war against them. I will not give you any of their land. They're the descendants of Lot, and I gave them the city of Ar. Ar means foe. It means adversity. That's what God said. Now, they knew, when they saw the Moabites, they just knew this was their enemy. Because the Moabites had tried to curse them. They tried to conquer them. They tried to bring compromise into them. The Moabites were the depiction of what an enemy is. You see, God was training them so they could learn this is not your enemy. If you treat it like an enemy, you will be going against the purposes of God. So God says, do not treat that as an enemy. Walk on by. Why? Because in the heat of battle, things can get a little bit tough. Now watch this. Deuteronomy 20, when you are attacking a town, which we have to do from time to time, right? We're on the offensive. We're being aggressive. We're having to come against things. And the war drags on, which sometimes it will. Come on. You got to have to amen just as much that as the first part. You must not cut down the trees with your axes. Now watch this. Deuteronomy 20:19. You may eat the fruit, but do not cut down the trees. Are the trees your enemies that you should attack them? Oh, God says, I'm trying to train you here. I want you to see what is actually the enemy. Because that woman you're married to is not the enemy. That child in your home is not the enemy. That boss that you work for is not the enemy. God said, I want you to learn what is the enemy. Because if you struggle against something that is not your enemy, you are struggling against the purposes of God. Let me show you what I mean. Intense emotional time in the Garden of Gethsemane. Peter is watching all this unfold. Now, Peter's the one that says, hey, listen, you don't mess with Jesus. That's my Jesus. You don't mess with him, right? That's right. Lord forbid. God forbid, you're not doing that. He sees Judas come up. He recognizes right away what that idiot's up to. He knows. Kissing him. Oh, great. Then he sees all these guys standing around getting ready to, and they're trying to arrest Jesus. How do you think that makes Peter feel after a night in Gethsemane, where there was under such emotional intensity that they're falling asleep because things are so intense? He sees this guy who is a servant of the high priest who is standing right there. He's trying to arrest Jesus. Peter grabs his sword and takes a whack at this guy. Now, I don't know, but I think the guy saw it coming. And he went, or maybe it was, and he cut off his ear. I think Peter was aiming for here. And the guy flinched. Oh, yeah. I mean, who aims for an ear? I mean, if you're trying to bring somebody down, you don't shoot them in the ear. You don't cut their ear off. He flinched. Jesus looked at him, picks up the ear, puts it back on the guy, heals the guy right there, which goes to show you and proves that just because somebody sees a miracle does not mean they will come into the kingdom. He turns to Peter and he says, what are you doing? Put away the sword. That guy is not the enemy. If you live that way, you will die that way. If you live jousting against things that are not your problem, you will end your life prematurely. You will die by the sword, not by the purposes of God. Jesus could have turned to him and said, do you not understand that that man is fulfilling the purposes of God in this hour for us? He must do what he's doing. David got it. David saw that guy cursing him. He goes, you know what? He said, I don't know, maybe God told him to do that. Who am I to tell? That could be in the purposes of God. You see, one of the biggest challenges is when I struggle against, I look at something as a problem and I call that the enemy. That storm, I call it the enemy. That person, I call it the enemy. Now, I may not say it with my lips, but I'm thinking it. They have now become my enemy, and now they are eating up all of my RAM. Because I am now totally preoccupied. I am now struggling and wrestling against that situation, that person, this issue, when God has never told me that any of those things are my enemy. Come on. Today would be a great day for God to say to us, exactly what in your life is really the enemy? And what of all this other stuff is really working with the purposes of God? That I need to call a truce and a surrender and say, I will not resist, fight, struggle, wrestle, contend, bicker, complain about anything. I will only go against what God has told me is the enemy. Now, come on, we get these backwards. Sometimes we got stuff that's the enemy in our life, and we don't want to do anything. God says, he's talking about the Midianites. He said, look, the Midianites are destroying you. Get up and go harass them. Do something about it. But sometimes there are things that are at work in our life. They're not the enemy at all. It's not the enemy at all. This is actually fulfilling the purposes of God. What a good thing. You know what? I want to tell you something. One of the greatest energy givers in my Christian experience is the moment that I stop fighting what I was never meant to fight against anyway. Jesus told Peter, put the sword away. That's not the enemy. What would be the enemy? What would happen in me if I were to fight what God says don't fight? That becomes a big enemy. Hey, there's a lot of freedom in that, isn't there? Say, oh my gosh, that's not even the enemy. I thought what they did to me, surely God would say, well, that's the enemy. No. That's actually the purposes of God working for us to get us into all that he has for us. Wow. No wonder God says to us, don't even go there. Nope. Pass by that. Bypass that. We avoided that. Why? Because it's not the enemy. God says, don't waste your time. Don't waste your strength. Don't waste your space. Don't waste your energy on that. Aim at what the real enemy is and receive the purposes of God.